All right, guys, we're back for another episode today of Brushing Them Back with Kobe White. Finally got Kobe back in Foxworth for a while. Looks like the remainder of his season will be spent here in Mississippi, especially with the damage they had in Florida. Kobe, how you doing today, brother?
Man, I'm doing good. Doing really good.
Well,
Excited.
for our listeners and our viewers, we have quite a treat today. We have the Robbie Falk going to be with us today talking about the influence of the media. We're going to talk a little bit today about the influence of the media on the game. And here's for you that do not know who Robbie Falk is, here's who this guy is. He's a 247 sports contributor. He's a Starkville Daily beat writer. He also is a co-host of a podcast that I thoroughly enjoy called Thunder and Lightning. Robbie, glad to have you here today, and thank you for taking time to come on.
Man, I appreciate y'all having me on. I want to talk a little baseball. I'm kind of depressed with what's going on in football this weekend.
We were not even going to mention football.
I'm glad we got Colby on here. Let's talk about baseball.
Yeah, we were. I was not even going to mention football. I am so aggravated right now. So, all right, let's a couple of topics that you and I discussed before we went on the air. One of the points that I think is amazing, because you report and write about sports, all aspects of sports, how difficult it's got to be for you to be able to take something you're seeing on a field of play and translating it either in printed text or through some type of live broadcast that you're doing, trying to convey what's going on in a way that keeps everybody engaged. I know Kobe and I, we're new to this podcasting deal, and it's difficult. And you're an expert at it. So tell us a little bit how you get it done.
Well, I don't know if I'm an expert. I do this, but I don't know if I would consider myself an expert at it. I've always tried to approach whether it's a broadcast or doing podcast or writing a story. I've always tried to approach it in the same way that I grew up on, because I wanted to be a broadcaster whenever I was a kid. I wanted to be the next Jack Crystal. I really idolized Jack Crystal and Jim Ellis. I wanted to be those guys. And I thought Jack always did a great job of painting a picture for the viewer, or the listener rather, that is not at the ball game. He was able to tell you exactly what was happening, and you could almost feel like you were there. And so that's something that I've tried to put that into my writing, and most of the time it's probably not any good, but I always want to paint a picture to where the listener or the viewer or whatever, the reader is going to feel like they were at that ball game. And like I said, sometimes I might not do a good job at that, but that's how I try to approach it. I want to be able to kind of map out a game. And sometimes it might run a little long, but I would rather go long on a story or be long-winded in how I talked about things to make sure that the reader's able to put themselves in that environment and feel like they were actually there.
So we said we weren't going to talk about football, and we're not. We're going to try to stay as close to the baseball line as we can today, because to me, baseball is a game. I've always felt the best way to experience a game of baseball is live. But I do understand that watching it on television, a good commentator or a good storyteller is key to the success of that event. I mean, is that you just mentioned one of the greatest voices of all time, Jack Crystal, and you even threw Jim Ellis in there for good measure. And I love Jim Ellis. I love listening to him. But Jack Crystal, to me, will always be the voice of the Mississippi State Bulldogs. And you set a pretty high bar if you're trying to shoot for Jack Crystal now.
Well, I didn't know anything else. That's all I thought. I thought everybody was Jack Crystal, because that's all I listened to was Jack Crystal and Jim Ellis. And when I grew up, we didn't have SEC Network or SEC Network Plus growing up. So every baseball game, if you weren't at the baseball game, you had to listen to Jim Ellis. And I just always thought Jim Ellis did such a great job on the radio talking about the baseball game. And even when he wasn't talking about the baseball game, he did a great job filling space there. So both of those guys were very, very influential to me, not only as a broadcaster, where I wanted to kind of start, but as a journalist. And when I write about the game, people just want the facts. Get to the score, get to the facts of the game. Don't give your personal opinion on a lot of the stuff. And I'm very opinionated now. But when it comes to writing and it comes to broadcasting, you've just got to talk about the facts. You got to give the score, the time of the game, and what you're seeing on the field. And so that's how I try to portray my own writings. And I've taken what I've learned from those guys from a broadcasting perspective into journalism.
It's something I've kind of noticed, speaking on like the writing part of it, and obviously commentating too. You've got to really know the game. It seems like you've had, prior to having that role and having that job, it seems like the people, for one, the word uses that they use to describe different aspects of different sports or whatever. It's like these aren't just regular guys that are just really smart and really good with, I guess, literature or whatever. They actually know the sport on an extreme level to be able to relay that kind of information, which I think is pretty cool when you talk about being an athlete, talking to somebody. I feel like you feel like that's kind of a prerequisite kind of thing, or you just think it kind of happened for you, some not as much, or how do you think that kind of happens?
Yeah, I think, and especially in baseball, I mean, there are a lot of intricacies in baseball. I mean, you're talking about the different pitchers are throwing different types of pitches. The ball spins differently with this pitch than it does this one. You have the RPMs on the spin on this breaking ball in comparison to a fastball that might be a little flatter. You have to know a lot about that stuff. I've had to learn a lot of that over the years. I didn't grow up a huge baseball fan. I kind of grew to love it in junior high, and I fell in love with Mississippi State baseball when I was in junior high into high school. I didn't know anything about any of that stuff, and baseball's such a for lack of a better word, is such a weird game. There's so many different things. You got to hit the ball at a certain part of the bat to be successful. 30. If you're getting a base hit 30% of the time, you're doing a good job. That's 30% of the time. And the greatest hitters in baseball history have under 40% of their at bats as hits. I mean, it's a game of failure. And there's so many. Just to your point, there's so many different things that you have to be on top of when it comes to baseball. But I've kind of grown to love baseball so much and study it so much. I've gotten a lot better than I was in the past, but there's still so many things that I have to learn, and you guys know it more than I do because I'm not a baseball player. But I've just become kind of a student of the game in baseball because I've fallen in love with it so much.
Yeah, and that's what's cool about it is like I've been in games before, and certain little things that were not normal for me to do, a writer would write about it and would know that I'd done it. And I'm like, I didn't tell anybody I'd done this. He saw it and he understood the game enough to be able to say, well, I saw this. That's what's cool is like I never would have thought. But I mean, I guess if you're around it and you're seeing it a bunch, and that's what's cool about this kind of thing is it ain't just the average person watching this, and describing it and talking about it, which was pretty awesome for me to see firsthand.
Yeah, and there's still times where I'm going to look pretty dumb when I'm talking about a baseball game. And I'm surprised I haven't been called out more than I have from baseball players for saying certain things. Because I can't get up there and hit a Colby White fastball. I mean, you could give me 10 chances to hit one of your fastballs, and I couldn't do it. So, I mean, who am I to be qualified enough to break down your game or whatever? So, and that's one thing I try to take into account too. I don't like to bash any players or anything like that because I know I couldn't get out there and do it.
Yeah, well, and kind of thinking from like a player's point of view too, to add on to that is like, heck, when we mess up, a lot of times, especially with me, I'm sitting here thinking, I really hope they don't try to sugarcoat it too much being nice because it is, it is what it is. You go out there and you allow 2 runs in the 8th and put your team behind, that blame, it ain't nowhere but me, Obviously it should be, and I feel like how hard is it as somebody writing stuff to sit there and think, this is what it is. Should I soften it a little bit to not make it as harsh, or do you ever kind of go through that mindset, or is it kind of?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I especially go through that covering college athletics and in high school too. I cover a lot of high school. I just don't. I don't like to criticize too heavily individuals. I might say something as, Mississippi State didn't play well. They didn't pitch well as a team. I don't like criticizing individuals. And especially, when you think about the college game, and most of you guys are not even getting a full scholarship to play baseball. A lot of you guys are having to come out of pocket to pay for school and play baseball on top of that. I mean, you're asked to be basically a full-time athlete on top of being a full-time student. It's hard for me to come out there and criticize somebody publicly like that. I refuse to do it.
Yeah.
Well, you're not going to call any names because you're that kind of guy, but you do know other writers that don't have a problem. If Kobe had a bad game, everybody's going to know about it.
Yeah, there's some people that'll do it. But me personally, and I don't think that it's completely wrong to, bring to light that somebody struggled in a ball game. I mean, you're just calling the facts for what they are. But I don't like putting names out there and blasting a player in the public. I mean, there's times where if somebody asks a question about, somebody, I might say, well, he's struggling right now or something like that. But I'm not going to say, so and so stings or something like that. I think, for me, like I said, it would be hypocritical to get out there and throw somebody under the bus when I can't go out there and do the same thing that they can do, and if I was in their same shoes, I might be in the same position or worse.
I want to back up a little bit. I got to find a little back history on you here. You said you knew from an early age that you wanted to do what you're doing right now. How early of an age? Like, when did you know I'm going to write about amateur and college athletics, by the time I'm ever how old I am? So when did you know that?
Well, I didn't know I was going to do this until I was in college. So I'll kind of try to give a brief backstory of my career. I grew up in Louisville, Mississippi, and my dad's a preacher, but before he became a preacher part time, when he was in college and a little after, he was a radio broadcaster for Laser 96, which is now in Starville. It was, I believe at the time, it was in Eupora, and he did football games. So years go by, and we moved to Louisville, and somebody found out that my dad he could call football games. He was a play-by-play guy. So they wanted him to be the play-by-play announcer for Winston Academy football. They were starting up they had a local channel in Louisville, and they were starting up a broadcast. They were going to broadcast the games on Friday night, tape them, and then play them after the game. So he started that with Mark Cutsmith was the head coach at Winston Academy, and they went on a run of 4 straight state championships. And he had some iconic. I mean, some of these clips were going out all across the state. My dad was calling people nicknames. He made up these great nicknames, and so all this stuff was sticking. And my dad was really good at it. And just being around my dad, I felt like I wanted to do that. I wanted to be a broadcaster. So I grew up. I was listening to Jack Crystal and Jim Ellis, like I said. Being around my dad, I really kind of grew a love for the game of football, and I just was obsessed with it. I would turn on my NCAA football games on PlayStation. I would turn the volume down, and I would broadcast the game as I'm playing. And so I felt like I actually feel like I'm pretty good at this. I don't think I could do anything else but this. So my goal was to be a broadcaster. When I was coming up through high school, I started calling those games with my dad. He was the play-by-play guy. I was the color guy. I would have a halftime show and all that. The local radio station, when I got into college in Louisville, they allowed me to call some playoff games for Louisville High School. I called some state championship games in baseball for Nanawoya when they won a couple of state championships. So I really felt like that was the direction I was going, and I got into an internship at Mississippi State doing media relations. And actually, the first job I had was right after I graduated. State hosted the Super Regional in baseball in 2007. that was the first thing I ever did with Mississippi State Media Relations, and I was hooked on Mississippi State baseball, and I wanted to be in public relations. I wanted to be the Mississippi State baseball SID one day. So, I'm going through college. I was doing that internship basically for free for 5 years, and just got married. My wife was hounding me about getting a job because I was making no money for the family, and she wanted me to go work at Lowe's, Walmart, wherever. And I refused to do it. I just said, just wait. I'm meeting some people here. I'm going to get this done. Okay. Just let me do it. So anyway, my senior year in college, a job opened up at rivals.com to be the Mississippi State beat writer for Rivals. And so the job was paying $24,000 a year, which was like, I was a millionaire if I got that money. Because I was a senior in college, I'd made nothing to that point. So I jumped on it. And ever since, I've been covering Mississippi State. I worked there for about a year. And then I joined 247. I joined Paul Jones. He brought me on with him. And Starkville Daily News a few months later. And I've been working here ever since.
And the legend of the Robbie Faulk began.
That I don't know if there's any kind of legend. I might be notorious. I don't know, but
I was wondering if you were going to bring up your father is a legend. I was wondering if you were going to bring him up in our conversation. So
he is. I mean, everywhere I go, somebody asks me. I can find somebody that asks me if I'm Brother Rob's son. He's made such a impact in so many people's lives. Everybody knows him, and he's happy all the time. He's a big talker, so you can hear him from a mile away. So I will forever be Brother Rob's son.
So, I'm also excited to hear we got Nana Way in a actual broadcast. That's not every day you stumble across that. So
no, Winston County's going to get its shine.
I know, man. I'm telling you, you're just throwing out some places. We got some listeners from around the country that are like, "What is this guy talking about?"
They're going to know about Nanawoya. Between me and Bart Gregory, they will know about Nanawoya.
So,
Kobe, let me ask you a question. Kobe, I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
Hey, did you ever catch yourself reading some of the stuff that these guys wrote about you when you were at Mississippi State?
Yeah. Well,
be truthful, man. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I think there's no way that, especially a kid growing up how I did, and you would do stuff and it would end up in a local newspaper or something like that, but it didn't end up all over the internet and places like that. So when you first get that taste of that, it's like, man, somebody's writing, thinks enough about whatever had happened to say, I'm gonna put my name involved with something. I was like, man, this is pretty cool. People wherever can read this, and yeah, absolutely. I remember getting on with a game, and I'm like, whether bad or good, and I'm like, I'm gonna see what was said. Just kind of. And I think every player does that. If I had to guess, some big time players probably don't, but somebody coming out of high school and junior college like I did, obviously I was glued to it. So.
Yeah, and especially on baseball too. I mean, you just don't get that kind of coverage around the country. But Mississippi State's a lot different than a bunch of places. And so I can imagine, baseball players, and I've noticed that too, covering kids and recruiting and stuff. Baseball guys are just so much more appreciative of coverage than anybody else, just because I think it's so common to have football recruiting covered, football games and stuff like that, and basketball too. But what I've noticed at Mississippi State, we cover baseball and women's basketball more than just about anybody. And I think that the kids just get so much more excited about reading that stuff than they do in any other sport. And also that 2019 team was so fun. I mean, I'm sure you guys couldn't get enough of some of that stuff.
Oh yeah, man, and that's what was so cool is like you play with so many good players, and you go to look like long before I got to state, reading up on Jake Mangum, watching him play, and then there's an article and it's got his name in it, and then a couple lines down mine's in it. And it's like, man, it's pretty crazy, Yep,
that was one of my more fun teams to cover. I really enjoyed that team. It was so talented. That team and the 2016 team were probably the two most talented teams I've ever covered in baseball. Just so many dudes on that team. I mean, it was just the pitching, the hitters, defensive guys. I mean, those were some fun teams.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, for our listeners, how many hours would you say per day, or how many miles of travel? Could you kind of put that in perspective for what would be kind of a typical day for you on a game day or whatever?
Well, a lot of times I'm not doing a whole lot during the day. But we can have there can be some days where you got a 15-hour work day, and then there's some days where you have a 1-hour work day. I mean, I kind of love that. I love how it's kind of unpredictable like that. Baseball season is a lot of hours. For a typical baseball game is going to be over 3 hours long. So you're getting there an hour probably before first pitch. You got a 3-hour ball game, and then an hour or so after the game. I mean, I think was it 19? You'll have that game against LSU in the SEC tournament, 17 innings.
Yeah.
So we were at the park till 2:30 a.m. I think that day. So you never know. I never know what I'm going to experience during a baseball weekend, a baseball day. And then you have, some weeks you have 4 games that you're going through. So baseball is definitely probably the most time I spend at at a location working. But it's also one of the easiest things to cover because it's so laid back.
Yeah.
What's the longest distance you've ever traveled to cover an event?
Well, I went to Portland, Oregon for the women's basketball Sweet 16. Women's basketball is probably the farthest I've driven, and then the next would be Omaha. I've been to Omaha 4 times.
You drove to Portland, Oregon?
I did not drive to Portland, but No. I drove to the year before. I drove to Kansas City and Columbus in a week's time, Columbus, Ohio. Yeah. And the year before that, I drove to Oklahoma City and Dallas in a week's time from Sweet 16 to the Final Four. So that was a lot of miles. But we went to the Tallahassee Regional, drove down there in 2018. That was about 7.5 hours, I think. But Omaha would be my furthest trip for baseball.
And the longest trip, because when they get there, they play for a while.
I was there for that national championship. I was there for 2 weeks. And I was there for about a week and a half for 2019. I mean, they played 3 games, I think.
Yeah, don't bring up the national championship. It just brings back bad memories for Kobe in 19. So.
Man,
they got it done, though.
Yeah, I mean, as bad as things didn't happen the way we wanted to, I couldn't even imagine being able to enjoy that experience just being there for 2 weeks. Like, I mean, yes. You naming off places you've been able to go and watch sports and stuff. I mean, that's so cool to be able to say, hey, I went to Portland, Oregon, and I went here and there. And it's like, man, the average person, whether they make a ton of money, work or whatever, still don't have that opportunity because of time, And to be able to have a job that's part of it, you got to wake up every morning and think, man, this is pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. I never take this job for granted. I think it's the best job on the planet, whether I'm making a bunch of money or not. To be paid to go watch sports, I'll never complain about it. I mean, it's just awesome to be able to follow these great teams and go to some cool places and meet some cool players. I mean, I've had a chance to cover Dak Prescott, Jake Mangum, Terry McCowan. I mean, some of the greatest players in their respective sports in Mississippi State history. And I mean, to me, I count myself blessed every single day to be able to do stuff like that.
Exactly.
I just want to point out that bringing up the 2019 baseball team, when did you say your media journey started? 2000 and what?
2013.
So you were a credentialed medium, let's see, trying to think where you would have been in your process. And when Tebow gave the speech, you remember that everybody remembers the Tebow speech, right? After Ole Miss beat them and y'all never,
Yep.
nobody will ever outwork me. The moment I saw Jake Mangum on the podium giving the address to the media after it was over, and he's pointing out that this guy's going to bring a championship, this guy's going to bring a championship. That was the moment I knew that Mississippi State was finally going to get that national championship that eluded them, because it was a Tebow type address.
Yeah, and I mean, I think those players, Colby can probably speak on it too. Those players could see it with that staff, the preparation that Chris Lemonis and that staff had. That's why I have no doubt that last year was just kind of a fluke. I cannot see Chris and that staff not turning it back around. And I believed every word that Jake Mangum said in that address, that he really believed that Chris Lemonis was going to bring that first national title.
Man, and I'll never forget stepping foot on campus and being around those guys for a little bit, players, coaches, and all, and sitting there thinking, this is a whole different level of expecting to win. Like, I came from a junior college and we won a state championship, but that was junior college, and this is at a whole bigger level. But when I got around like Jake and those guys, and I'll never forget that feeling. Like, it wasn't any kind of pressing at all, playing or anything like that. It was just we're good enough to win every game we play. And it just seems like once you get that going, it's hard for it to stop. You know, the team went in 18, and they kind of, I guess that attitude kind of kept carrying, because when I got there, man, it was pretty easy just to be that little piece of the puzzle to plug in and just follow up what everybody else done before me. So it's a special thing what they have, especially with Coach Lemonis and all, because obviously that's the attitude that they're pushing still. And obviously to be able to win a national championship, there's tremendous amount of talent. But, you know, you look at like the Tennessee team last year, they had a ton of talent, but kind of hadn't been to Omaha in a little while, and then had success there. So it's like, well, you know, how do you adopt that culture and keep it going year after year? I mean, I feel like it goes from the head coach all the way down, you know, onto the captains of the baseball team. And then, yeah, it's just like you were talking about. I mean, when Jake said that, I was thinking we were going to do it 19. Obviously, everybody else did too. But then team comes around 2 years later and does it, and you don't question it at all, you know. It's like, man, this makes perfect sense. It wasn't no shocker to me, obviously. But
yeah, you got to have that leadership too, like Jake. Tanner Allen was huge for Mississippi State to have him in that 2021 season. The leadership is really where it begins. You can coach it all day long. I mean, you can set the expectations as a coach, but you got to have that guy in the locker room. And I think Jake Mangum was that, and Tanner Allen was that. And that's why those teams were going to Omaha regularly.
Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget this. This is random, but I'll never forget Jake telling me one time I had struggled in an inter squad, got hit around a little bit, and he told me, this was one night, he told me, he's not going to remember this. He said, man, I'm not talented. Because I was telling him, I was like, man, I didn't grow up this real talented guy. Because Jake had all these Division I offers, all these SEC offers. And I told him, I was like, man, I'm not very talented. It's a whole lot harder for me. It's going to take time for me. And he was like, man, I'm not talented neither. And he said something to the nature of, I'm just willing to take it as far as I can to win.
Yep.
And that stuck with me from that day forth. And I'm like, man, you know, you look at Jake, obviously to the outside, it looks very talented. But then when you see how he works and stuff, it's like, man, is it talent? Is it, because obviously he don't believe it is. I mean, whether it's him being modest or whatever, obviously he's talented. But to the extreme success he has had, he didn't believe that. And, that attitude, that's a special thing that Jake has, and that's why Jake's going to be a big leaguer for a long time, I believe.
I have no doubt Jake's going to be in the MLB. I have the same thoughts on Jake as I did on Dak Prescott. You're just not going to stop them. They're going to do whatever it takes until they fall dead. I mean,
exactly.
you're going to have to kill them to keep them out of the league, and that's what's going to happen with Jake. I mean, you're not going to stop him from rising to that level. And it's a testament to the mindset that he has. He's got a dad too that played at the highest level, so that helps. You know, having that guy in the same house that helps when you have that kind of mentality. But Jake he's always been a guy that's going to show it. He's not all talk. He's going to show you how to do it. And like I said, I mean, I have no doubt that guy's going to make it in the league because of that mindset.
Oh yeah.
Well, Robbie, a few minutes ago, you made a statement that you personally don't like to single out single players. If they have a good performance or bad performance, you don't like doing that. You also said you know plenty of guys in your industry that will do that. So, in this, your own personal opinion, how much power does the media, writers, sportscasters, whatever, how much power do you truly have as a group to control the flight or the plight of an actual athlete? Like, I'll give you a prime example. Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge, they're all over Twitter and everywhere else, but Aaron Judge is the true single season home run champion right now. Now, I grew up watching a lot of guys that were a lot more talented than he was, hitting balls a lot farther than he did. And here's where me and Kobe butt heads a lot. Kobe said no guy that has ever been accused, caught, whatever, of trying to enhance his performance should ever get an opportunity to be like in the Hall of Fame, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I personally feel like that, yeah, they got caught or they were accused of or whatever, but there's a lot of guys that cheated. They just didn't get caught. So how do you fall on that? I mean,
on the steroid?
If you had a chance to vote Barry Bonds, let's say, into the Hall of Fame, would you vote for him or against him?
I'm personally for Bonds going in just because he was such a good player before all that. And two, I don't think steroids can help you hit a baseball. I think it still takes a lot of skill to hit a baseball and to play at that level. But I can see Colby's point of view too, just from the spirit of the game and as a competitor himself. He's put in the work to do things, and somebody else has taken a leap because they're using a performance enhancer. I can see that point of view as well. But Bonds was a freak show before he was even on steroids. And he might be kind of the exception to some of those other guys, McGuire and Sammy Sosa and some of those guys. But he had already accomplished so much, I think, before that. Was a tremendous base stealer back when he was with the Pirates and all that. So, I mean, I would probably go with Bonds. I definitely think if you're going to vote him in, then Pete Rose has to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still kind of disgusted about that he's not in there. But you know, I don't know. I don't know where I fully stand on that. I've kind of bounced back and forth.
Well, the thing that I'm kind of thinking about too is there's been others that have went through the voting process and didn't go in and will never be in, and are obviously, you look at their numbers like, man, these are Hall of Fame numbers, and they didn't go in. It's like, well, how can you put this steroid guy in and you didn't vote this other one because he took he took steroids, got caught, and they didn't vote him in because of that? To me, it's got to be one strict. Either if you get caught with steroids, you're automatically, you don't have a chance to go in, or they all can. I don't feel like it can be an exception. Oh, this guy can, and that's just my thing. And then, like you talk about the Pete Rose argument, it's like he done something that actually didn't even affect performance whatsoever.
All right.
He's not in there just off of a moral thing. And something that I'm kind of thinking about is, I've heard people say this, whether this is true or not, but they said Bonds with some of the media, they say he was kind of a jerk. He was not very approachable. And he was just not really a great guy to the media. And some people say that was kind of their way getting back at him, whether that's true or not. And obviously,
no, I think there's something to that. Well, that we're human at the end of the day, and we're going to lean towards being more acceptable to people that we like sometimes, and sometimes people that are jerks to us, we're going to be. We might be a little more critical. I might not be as hard on Jake Mangum as I would somebody that has been kind of a jerk. Because Jake's such a great guy. So, I mean, I'll admit that. I mean, there's times that you might be thinking in the back of your head, this he's a really good dude. I don't think I want to really, say something negative about him. I mean, that happens. I think that definitely happens. And that's probably hurt Barry Bonds too. I mean, having the media on your side, I mean, what's that phrase they said, don't pick a fight with somebody that can buy ink by the barrel or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we kind of have the unlimited resources in getting words out there.
Mm-hmm.
We can paint a narrative. I try not to abuse like my platform in that way. I try to do it for as best I can for good sometimes. But yeah, that happens. People have a chance to sit there and write a 1,000-word column on something that they don't like and give their opinion on it. It's right there, and there's nothing that anybody can do to stop it outside of the editor of a paper or editor of a website or something.
Exactly.
That's what I was curious about the control of the narrative. If for whatever reason, if somebody says something that you didn't agree with or whatever, it's got to be a moral issue for a lot of writers. Because I mean, let's say for example, I'm in the press room and I'm trying to cover Kobe, and Kobe's got no time for me. Well, human nature, I go to the computer and I say something probably before thinking that's pretty negative, and it's not fair to him, but I do it anyway. That's why I was curious about when you said earlier, you said you try not to single anybody out. I was just curious. There's got to be a few occasions that happened to you, especially probably early in your.
Yeah. No, there's been times where I might say something. I might get caught up in the heat of the moment and say something about a player or something like that. And, that's something as I've gotten older and I've gotten more experience in this, I've tried to move away from. Because at the end of the day, I remember that these guys are college students. Some of these guys are high school students. They're making, I mean, NIL has changed some things, but most of them are making no money doing this. And it's not like they're out there trying to lose or trying to perform badly. So, I mean, that's kind of how I like to approach things. I try to, at least. I'm not saying that I've never done it before. So I don't want anybody going up there and digging up a tweet from 2012 or something. That happens every now and then. But
it's tough being the king of Twitter, man.
It's tough whenever you got a platform and you say something and somebody can find something that contradicts something you said from like 6 years ago, And I mean, Colby can have that happen to him as well, being an athlete. It happens to athletes all the time. But yeah, when you have a platform, when you have some followers or whatever, people are going to find some stuff that you said that might contradict something that you're saying now. So I'm sure somebody can find something that makes me look like a hypocrite here.
Well, and the thing about that too, I feel like from the other point of view of it, as a player, the player has to understand that, hey, this guy's doing his job. We don't know the things that are happening behind closed doors, like what they're wanting to be asked. I don't know that specifically, like necessarily with your job or whoever else's job, but I'm sure somewhere that somebody's probably telling some people, hey, you need to go find out what this is. We heard this about this guy. Just try to get their point of view on it. And as a player, sometimes you get caught up in it too personal, and it's like, they were just asking, doing their job actually, and it's and I feel like that's how it kind of gets unfair, and some people come at writers or whatever. But there's so many variables into the whole thing that we might not take into account.
Yeah, it's never personal for me with a player or coach or anything. I mean, I'm just most of the time I'm just talking about what I'm seeing, and I'm not trying to be too critical or anything like that, or be personal with any of the coaches or players. I mean, I'm just trying to do my job and call it like I see it. Because really the thing that I despise more than anything is somebody saying, well, he's toting water, he's just being a homer, this and that. I try to be as objective as I possibly can on how I approach what I'm seeing on the field.
Right.
Good luck to that, because it's got to be a tough job to do. Like we talked about earlier, it's got to be tough to paint a picture. I knew we weren't going to talk about football. We're going to talk about baseball, but like last night's events, for example, it had to have been tough to write about that this morning. So,
yeah, no, And I hadn't written any stories yet, but I wrote plenty on Twitter. I had to actually go back and delete a few tweets, to be honest with you.
I would have thrown the computer out the window after last night's effort.
But we had a lot to say on Thunder and Lightning, I'll tell you that.
I wanted to close out with speaking of Thunder and Lightning, I had a question about Clark and Palmero, but I'm on too much respect for both guys. I'm not going to get into all that this late in the show, especially. Me and you might have to talk about that separately. So
yeah, we can.
All right, so Kobe, you got anything before we? Because I'm going to give him the last 4 or 5 minutes of the show to list off all of his social media stuff. So you got anything else before we let him go?
Man, of course, we appreciate you coming on. It's big time having you on the show. Obviously, good to talk with you again. We really appreciate it a lot, and hopefully them dogs will get back on track next week. So
yeah, man, I appreciate you having me. I'm glad to see you back and up and at 'em. Of course I do a minor league update every week during the season, and I'm looking down at that injury list, and there's just former dogs just all over it this year. So I'm wishing you guys the best, hoping you guys get back on the field next year. And I think you're going to be bigger and better than ever after that surgery. I think you'll be ready to roll.
I hope so. I feel great. I know that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's a few more that are in your same boat, man. I mean, this Tommy John stuff is just it's a booger. It's hitting everybody.
I just spoke to Preston Johnson yesterday. He's out, just had surgery.
That's another one, man. And I mean, State had 3 or 4 this year, and I'm looking at that list. Christian McLeod just had one. I think Eric Sarantola's hurt. It's just it's hit everybody. But the good news is nobody's scared of that anymore, and it seems like guys are coming back stronger than ever. So I'm ready to see you guys back in there, because it was a heck of a year for former State players, even with that injury list as full as it was. I mean, we got a bunch of dudes that we covered that are making their way up to the big leagues. We'll have a big number of former dogs up there pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of former Bulldogs and guys making it to the majors, you made a statement earlier that if you had 10 chances against his fastball, you probably wouldn't do that well. I mean, This guy was the minor league pitcher of the year. I mean, don't be so hard on yourself.
Come on, now.
There ain't no way.
On a couple of them, I'd write a story about it personally. So
if I tipped one of those things, I'd put the ball in a case and hang it in my room. It would be shadow boxed. I'm telling you.
Come on now.
If I could get a tip, if I could just get just a piece of the bat on the ball, I'd be happy.
Crazy. That's absolutely crazy. All right, man. Look, this last couple of minutes, it's going to take at least 2 minutes, and that's you talking nonstop. Give us all your social media stuff.
Well, hopefully my phone don't go dead before then. We're rolling on fumes here.
Not on fumes.
Yeah, but of course you can come check us out at 247. I feel like, for baseball fans, there's no other place that covers Mississippi State baseball like us over there. So come over there and subscribe. We usually have a great deal for subscriptions there. You can follow me on Twitter at RobbieFalk247. I got a lot of Mississippi State and other nonsense on there from time to time. And then I got a YouTube channel. I try to do a YouTube live chat with State fans once a week. We've been having some good shows on there. So I'll be doing that on Monday night. I'll be back on there. So, and of course, if you aren't already subscribed to Thunder and Lightning, Brian Haydad and I, we've been rocking and rolling the last couple months and doing pretty good. So come check us out over there as well.
Folks, that is why he is the Robbie Falk. You hear all that stuff he's got going on, and just think that guy was excited to make $24,000 a year at one point in his life.
Hey, I'm still excited about that. It's not like
Robbie,
it's not like that those contracts are that high now as opposed to what they were.
Hey, can't thank you enough for coming on. I'm glad to see that you started off making minor league baseball money, and now you're in the major leagues making that real money. So,
not quite. All right. I'm not making
for all of our audio listeners. We're going to finish out with a couple of commercials. Kobe's got to pay the bills, he said. And for all of our YouTube listeners, We will be back next Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central. Our guest next week will be Brian Snow from Chicago, Illinois. He has a show called Snowman in the Morning, and he is excited to talk playoff baseball with us. So me and Kobe will have a pretty good time with that for sure. Robbie, can't thank you enough, brother.
I appreciate you, fellas.
Brushing them back with Kobe White, guys. See y'all next week.